Hello everybody, welcome to the I Am IT Geek YouTube channel. My name is Shabaz, and as ever I am the IT Geek. Welcome back to what is, I believe, episode 19 maybe. I keep on forgetting, like I said, I've said it in other episodes. Please look at the description to get what episode it is. I actually need to make a bit of a correction. I thought the last two episodes were going to be the last episodes in Module 2, but that's not the case. Again, I think we made this point that Microsoft have changed the exam, the sort of exam syllabus, literally after we started this series. So they made some changes again by the looks of it, and there's some additional sort of content for this module 2, which is what we're going to be going through in the next couple of episodes. I'm not with Dwayne's not with me again in this episode. He's recorded his bit separately again, just scheduling conflict. Unfortunately, another one of me. We've not been able to get together, but again, we will be back in a couple of episodes' time, so do not worry. So yeah, we're back with the SC300 series, continuing with it, and I'm 99% sure now, but 100% sure this is the last two episodes in Module 2. I do promise. So let's get started with the actual content. And yeah, like I said, I'm not going to reintroduce myself and Dwayne at the start of Module 3, so I'm hoping you know who we are by now and what we're about. So yeah, we are still on Module 2. I promise we will finish. This is still the implementing authentication and access management solution. And just to go into actually what this episode, the next two episodes, are going to be. This is actually implementing access management for Azure Resources. So this is a two-parter as well, and this is part one. So in part one, we're going to talk about assigning Azure roles. We're going to look at configuring custom Azure roles. And then we're going to talk about creating and configuring managed identities. And then Dwayne will take over. I'll hand over to Dwayne, and he'll do a demo around configuring custom Azure roles. Okay? So let's kick off by talking about assigning those Azure roles. Okay, so Azure Role-Based Access Control, or ABAC, is the authorization system you use to manage access to Azure resources. I'm pretty sure we've mentioned it in an earlier episode, especially in Module 1. So to grant access, you assign roles to users, groups, or service principals. Or you can do it to manage identities as well, at a particular scope. So your scope is like your subscription level, or your resource group level, or your resource level. So let's just talk about some of the steps you need to follow, when assigning your Azure roles to users. We've got step one. First of all, who needs access? Which user is requesting that access, or who do you need to grant it to? They need to choose the correct role. So depending on what they're wanting to do, you need to grant them the access. Depending on that, do they need to update passwords, or do they need to be able to assign applications, permissions to certain applications? Step three, you decide that level of access. So do we only need to be read only, or do we need to be, to be able to modify, or do you need to have full control at owner level? Step four, you need to confirm the admin has that relevant right. So once you've assigned it, or not, before you assign it, confirm that the admin has those rights that they're asking for. And then you assign that role. Okay, so what we're going to do now is just look into those 5 steps a little bit deeper. So who needs that access first of all? Okay, so a user. Only a single person is needed for that task. And you can assign to a role to users and in other tenants as well. So like, guest users as well. So it could be a user. Is it a group? So you use this when you need to grant a set of users rather than doing it individually to users. If there's multiple users that need the same access, you do it in a group. Service principal, we mentioned this a few times. So you assign a role to a service principal when you want to grant an application access to an Azure resource. So it might be that an application needs access to some storage or something like that. Then have managed identity. So you use the managed identity when you want an application to manage credentials for authentication. Okay, so that's when service principal is when an application needs access to a resource, and managed identity is when you want an application to manage credentials for authentication. So that's who needs access. Let's look at that step 2, which was to choose the correct role. So, you can use built-in roles or create a custom role with specific capabilities if you need. So say, the built-in roles are there, and you can obviously choose those. They're ready-made, predefined. But with a custom role, you can actually pick different different sort of areas of a different role. So you could pick a section out of maybe the user admin role that you might need. You might need security authentication or something like that from a different, authentication administrator role. So with a custom role, you can pick certain attributes from different roles. Let's talk about built-in roles for a second. So there's obviously different levels of built-in roles. These are ready-made roles. We first have the owner. This is full access to all resources, like a global admin essentially. You have the contributor, so you can create and manage all types of Azure resources, but you cannot grant access to other people. I guess that's a bit of a difference between the owner and contributor. Reader, a bit self-explanatory. You can only view the available Azure resources. You can't make any changes. Then I have user administrator. So you assign for the user access administrator, you assign access to Azure resources. And you have other specific roles, like we mentioned. You could have a virtual machine contributor, which can, if you assign that to somebody, they can, only have the rights to or the access to actually edit virtual machines. So step 3, I believe, was let's decide that level of access that somebody needs. Okay, there's different levels, obviously. And we can call this the scope, okay, the scope of your access. So it's also known as, like I said, different scopes. So scope is essentially a set of resources that access applies to. So in Azure, you can specify a scope at 4 different levels. I think I mentioned some of these earlier. One of the top level is the management group. Then you've got the subscription group. Then you've got the resource group and then the resource, okay? Scopes are structured in a parent-child sort of relationship. Each level of hierarchy makes a scope more specific. Okay, so as you go further down, you get more specific. And, the access can filter down as well. There is inheritance there. So it's always best practice to grant security principals the least privilege. So give them the rights of depending on the job they're fulfilling. Like I said, if they're doing user administration, so they need to change passwords, create groups, give them user administrator. If they need to, do sort of more security stuff, give them security administrator. If they need to look at compliance, give them compliance administrator, and so on. Okay. Try and avoid assigning broader rules at broader scopes, even if it does seem more convenient. Convenience not always the most secure way. So try and avoid assigning like really broad roles. Try and be more specific, again, depending on what role they're doing. By limiting roles and scopes, you limit what resources are at risk if the security principle is ever compromised. So limiting what resources you're limiting the sort of the risk element there and the risk footprint. Let's look at that confirming that the admin has relevant access as well. So again, if you're assigning, you're the admin who's assigning, you need to make sure you have those relevant rights to assign that role. Because if the admin you're using to assign that role doesn't have the access needed, so again, if it's a contributor, you can't assign roles to the contributor. So you need to make sure the admin has that relevant rights to assign that role in Azure. Okay, so that was step 4, I believe. Finally, that's step 5. Let's assign that role. Okay. So once the security principle, the role and scope, is all that information's gathered, you can then assign that role. But without the appropriate information, you can't assign that role. So make sure you've got all that information gathered from all the previous steps, and then you assign that role. Make sure we're using the correct tool. There's different tools you can use. You can use the Azure portal. You can use PowerShell, Azure PowerShell. Use Azure CLI, Azure SDKs. And also REST APIs as well. But again, make sure you're using the tool that best fits your requirements. Multiple tools, both GUI and kind of command line. So just choose a rule that best suits you, really. You can have up to 2,000 role assignments in each subscription. And this limit includes role assignments at the subscription, resource group, and resource scopes. You can also have up to 500 role assignments in each management group as well. So just some figures there to keep in mind for the exam. These could come up at some point. So 2,000 role assignments per subscription, 500 role assignments per management group. So keep that in mind. So let's move on to creating and configuring managed identities. So, a common challenge when creating a cloud solution is the management of the secrets, credentials, and certification and keys. These secure elements are used to secure communication between services, so quite important. Managed identities eliminate the need for developers to manage these credentials. Okay, so that we've got this common challenge of managing credentials and certificates and keys, and managed identities takes that away. So let's look at some of the benefits of using managed identities. So you don't need to manage credentials. Credentials aren't even accessible to you. So again, because there's that you're minimizing that sort of a risk footprint as well, because you're not having to manage and keep those credentials safe. You can use managed identities to authenticate to any resource that supports Azure AD authentication, including your own applications. So managed identities can be used without any extra cost. So couple in one there, couple of benefits in one there. You can authenticate to any resource and it don't cost anything. So 2 for 1. Let's look at some managed identity types now. Okay, so first of all, we've got system assigned. Some Azure services allow you to enable a managed identity directly on a service instance. When you enable a system assigned managed identity, an identity is created in Azure AD. The identity is tied to the lifecycle of that service instance as well. So when that resource is deleted, Azure automatically deletes the identity for you as well. So again, you don't have to separately delete that identity. So, and that's by design, only that Azure resource can use this identity as well to request those tokens from Azure AD. So again, minimizing that security footprint. So another managed identity type is user assigned. So you can create a managed identity as a standalone Azure resource. You can create a user assigned managed identity and assign it to one or more instances of an Azure service. For user-assigned managed identities, the identity is managed separately from the resource that it uses. Okay, so a bit of a difference from the system assigned as you saw. So that's me done. I am now going to hand over to Dwayne to go through that first demo. Over to you, Dwayne.
Thanks, Shabaz, and let's go through how we can create some custom roles within Azure for our Azure resources. So for this particular aspect of role creation and using roles, we're not going to go into Azure Active Directory. We can do some custom role capabilities within Azure Active Directory. If we go to all roles, we can create a new custom role. But in here, we're worried about how we are managing roles for our Azure resources. So we're going to go to, I'm going to just go to one of my resource groups here, and we have our identity and access management here for access control to our Azure resources. So I'll select access control here, and we can see roles within here. We have our actual roles within here, and let's say we want to allow a user to administer and build virtual machines, but they also need access to virtual networks, but not necessarily create virtual networks. We want them to use existing virtual networks. So let's look here at our roles, and let's add a role assignment. We're going to add a custom role here, and we're going to call this role VM admin with VNet access. And we're going to just say ability to create VMs, but assign existing VNets. All right, so we can do that. We can clone a role. We can create from scratch. We can start from a JSON. I'm going to say clone a role here, and we can say virtual machine contributor here. But what this is going to do, if we just clone this role, is all we're doing is making them a virtual machine contributor. So let's start from scratch here, and let's look at adding permissions. So here we can then start to assign our permissions. And if we look here and we do virtual machine and look at the permissions here for our virtual machine, we've got classic compute, we've got virtual machine image builders. If we look here and just do Microsoft Compute, here we've got the capabilities with our virtual machine. So we can see here we want read and write. We want the ability for VM sizes, VM operations. We can go through and add what we need there. And then also if we look here and we do those add permissions as well, and we do, again, let's just sort virtual machines, and you will see as well some capabilities here in terms of Microsoft Network. And you can see, here's virtual machines, capabilities with virtual machines. If we want to get on virtual networks, we can say virtual network, and find in here, we've got classic compute, we've got retain instances here. If we go down, again, Microsoft Networks, we have our network cloud here, and you can see here, hybrid clouds, virtual machines again, and if we get data actions. If I go back to my resource providers, let me just do network, and we go to classic network here, we can see register classic network capabilities if we're using classic network here. Now we get into our network security groups, our ability to work with those. Here, get a virtual network. Here we're going to give them read access to our virtual network for classic networking. Trying to find where the networking is for our current virtual networks. Just hold on one second. They change the names a lot of times on these resource names. Domain, service, resource provider. Let me think of where this could be. Azure Monitor, Classic Compute. A second here. Let's look at security. What do we have in security? We have the hardened rules. Here we can allow them to read just-in-time virtual network access. So our network cloud. And here we've got our cluster management for containers and for our hybrid network. Let's see, got rack status, your virtual machines, workload networks. Trying to find that resource group or that resource permission that would be our networking, and it's taking me a moment here to find that. Is that under compute? Let's see. There's virtual machine scale sets in here. So if we want to create scale sets, we can do that. Service bus, service relay. That was under network. Let's just look at all of them here a second. But really, what we're getting here and what you can see is we have all of our resource group designations here, so we can get very granular in terms of what our requirements are. We can set just simple read functions, simple write functions within our resources to be able to set those custom roles and get very, like I said, very granular in terms of what somebody has the ability to do. Right now, if we go and create this custom role as it is, we can create virtual machine scale sets, we can set virtual machine sizes and all of that. But there's going to be a certain amount of difficulty for somebody to be able to work completely in all of the resources within the resource group And again, we're doing this within a resource group itself. So we've put some boundaries in terms of this particular role, that it's right within the resource group, not within our environment. Let's go to Microsoft Resources here. Maybe here's create and deploy resources in the resource group. And we got tag names, we got tenants. So we could create, set up the resource links in here, set up the resources, allow them to do certain things within deploying within this resource group. I'm not going to spend any more time trying to find the networking. It's embedded and inside of a permission set that I'm not finding right this second. But that essentially, if you want to create a resource, a custom role for within a resource or within your subscription on Azure Resources, you go in, you create this custom role, and then you set those permissions in terms of what actions, whether they're going to get, whether they're going to create, whether they're going to read, write, be able to delete access. And then you, once you create that, then you have it against the scope, and then you can assign that role after you create it. So that is it for this particular demo. I will send it back to you, Shabaz, to close out this video. Thank you.
Thanks for that great demo, Dwayne. Much appreciated. Yeah, another great demo from Dwayne, and just again complements sort of the theory that's spoken about in this module. Again, this now brings us to the end of this first part of this topic. This is a penultimate episode in module 2, I promise. So the next episode we're going to do part 2, which you should be able to find straight after this episode on my YouTube channel, so please check that one out. Thank you everybody for watching. Thank you for all the support, the likes, the comments, and the subscriptions. In the description of the video, there is details on both mine and Dwayne's socials. Please do give us a nudge and DM us or tweet us if you've got any questions. Also, you can comment in the video. There's also, most importantly, a link to Dwayne's SC300 book by Pact. Again, buy that, follow that as you're going along. It will complement this series really well. And also a link to the GitHub labs as well, so you can follow the labs as Dwayne is doing them. So thank you very much for watching, everybody, and up until next time, thank you and goodbye.